Everybody to day 4 of the first ever Blueprint Leadership Summit, a meeting of the top leadership minds and luminaries in the business space brought to you by Conant Leadership. We are so happy to have you all with us. Today's topic is more relevant than ever, the power of performance with purpose, featuring esteemed guest Indra Nooyi, who our host Doug Conant will formally introduce in just a few minutes. But before we jump in, I'll tell you a little bit about the Blueprint and about Conant Leadership, cover some housekeeping items for today's Zoom webinar, introduce our founder, Doug Conant, and then we will be on our way. If you joined us for any of our previous summit sessions this week, the next few minutes of content will be very familiar to you, as you will have already heard it. First, I'm Amy Fetterman, Conant Leadership's editor-in-chief and director of content, and co-author with Doug Conant of the Wall Street Journal bestseller, The Blueprint, 6 Practical Steps to Lift Your Leadership to New Heights. And I'll be helping to moderate the Q&A portion of today's program. If this is your first time engaging with Conant Leadership, welcome. Let me tell you about our commitment to leaders. Conant Leadership's mission is championing leadership that works in the 21st century. Our mission is about making meaning, not money. Our founder, Doug Conant, takes no salary, and all profits after covering our operating costs are donated to enlightened organizations whose leadership is moving the world forward. We offer free resources like this summit as part of our larger high-impact suite of leadership resources and training, including our signature leadership development course, the Blueprint Bootcamp, which you'll hear a little bit more about at the end of our program. This Leadership Summit is a free week-long special event inspired by the leadership wisdom contained in the Blueprint. This summit is designed to empower leaders to meet the urgent leadership challenges of the 21st century in a way that is effective, authentic, and fulfilling. And this summit is a one-year celebration of our publication of the Blueprint. It's a relaunch. We published our book right into the teeth of the COVID-19 pandemic. And as you can imagine, we had to cancel all of our initial launch events. Fittingly, we wrote the Blueprint with turbulence in mind. It contains a practical 6-step process for building a strong enough leadership foundation to withstand the inevitable winds of change. It's meant to keep you grounded no matter what swirls around you or what crisis upends your life, your organization, or your team. On March 4th, 2020, our publication date, we never could have conceived that a global pandemic would transform the world of work and leadership in the ways it has and make the Blueprint book even more relevant than we could have imagined. Central to the Blueprint is the idea that the only way out is in, meaning that when you feel stuck or trapped by circumstances, you need to do the reflection and inner work to determine what kind of leader you are and how you want to show up for the people who are relying on you. Inspired by architecture and design thinking, the Blueprint honors the fundamental engineering principles that help our greatest structures withstand mighty storms. Any good structural engineer will tell you that the trick to building a soaring skyscraper is laying a deep foundation. Without a sturdy foundation, buildings can topple under their own weight and may not be able to withstand natural disasters or high winds. The same thing is true in leadership. Doug's firsthand experience leading thousands of people and teaching and coaching hundreds more has shown him that to lead through crisis, leaders need a sturdy and secure foundation that tethers them to every facet of their unique personality and skill set and keeps them grounded in their leadership purpose and beliefs. This lays the groundwork for enduring success that can really thrive in the face of adversity. The idea is that you don't have to learn to lead like somebody else. You need a proven process that helps you lead like only you can. And the incremental 6-step process and reflection exercises in the Blueprint enable you to do this little by little without chasing perfection in a way that nests into the crushing pace and responsibilities of modern life. The incredible leaders who we are honored to have joining us this week as keynote speakers all found a way to lead in a way that was true to who they are, that was anchored in a deep foundation, and that was connected to a higher purpose, all while also being highly effective in a turbulent environment. And we have a lot to learn from them. Let's watch a short video that tells the Blueprint story before we jump into today's session.
I was 32 years old. My wife and I had just had our second son. I was on my way into work one day. The receptionist intercepted me at the door and said, the senior vice president would like to see you in his office. He invited me to sit down. He said, Doug, your job has been eliminated. Clean out your office and be out of here by noon. My life changed in a snap. I was devastated, totally caught off guard. My mind was racing. What am I going to do? Just had another baby and a very large mortgage. I'm showing up for work early every day and one of the last people to leave at night, and I'm working on weekends. But I found out maybe I didn't do anything wrong, but I didn't do enough right. An important part of the concept of the blueprint is that you need to have a strong foundation that will allow you to deal with the winds of change in your life. Because we do powerfully believe the only way out of this is by going in. We're not teaching you some new technique for being more influential with others. We're helping you get more in touch with who you really are and how you want to show up in a way that speaks to you. That's the beauty of the blueprint process. All the leadership gurus that are out there, they have good points and they have good ideas, but they have not walked 1,000 miles in your shoes. I have.
That video sets the stage nicely for our summit at large, in particular, the fact that growth can come from adversity. And what a lesson in resilience this past year has been for all of us. Now, some quick housekeeping about the Q&A portion of today's program. If you think of a question you'd like to ask our panelists at any time during the town hall, simply type it into the Q&A box in the bottom center of your Zoom screen. When we get to the Q&A portion of the program, I will ask our panelists your submitted questions, and we'll try to get to as many as possible in the time allotted. While the Q&A box is for questions for our panelists, you can use the chat function for general comments and discussion, and my colleague Mara will be keeping an eye out there for any questions you might have about today's program. Finally, I'll introduce our host today, Conant Leadership founder and CEO Doug Conant, and he will personally introduce our special guest, Indra Nooyi, to you shortly. Doug Conant is the only former Fortune 500 CEO who is a New York Times and Wall Street Journal bestselling author, a top 50 leadership innovator, a top 100 leadership speaker, and a top 100 most influential author in the world. He has served as president of Nabisco Foods, president and CEO of Campbell Soup Company, and chairman of Avon Products. He's also chairman of CECP, that's Chief Executives for Corporate Purpose, and proudly serves on the boards of the Center for Higher Ambition Leadership, the National Organization on Disability, the Partnership for Public Service, and Hope College. With all of those announcements behind us, I'll turn it over to you, Doug.
Thank you, Amy, and welcome everyone. It's great to be with you again today, and we have a very special guest. Our special guest today is Indra Nooyi, who has made a special trip back to be with us and make herself available today. And Indra, we appreciate that. And Indra, I guarantee during this broadcast, there will be no more notifications that we're about to start the program. Let me introduce Indra a bit, and then I'm going to invite her to amplify on my introduction with any points she feels should be made. And then we'll get into some questions, and then we'll go back to Amy and do some Q&A. Indra is the retired chair and CEO of PepsiCo. I think that was 2018 when she retired. She was CEO there for 12 years. And a friend of mine, Steve Reineman, is the one who chose to promote her. And he made a lot of good decisions at PepsiCo. That was his best one. But she started her career with PepsiCo in 1994. She served as president and CFO from 2001 to 2006. Now, she started her career with J&J, a company we've heard a lot about in the news these days. And I would suspect, maybe we'll get into this, Indra, they had a very strong culture too, purpose-driven culture. And I wonder how that influenced your thinking. We may get into that. She was at J&J. She then went to the Yale School of Management. We like her anyway. And she worked for BCG and Motorola and ultimately ended up at PepsiCo. She's been consistently ranked among the world's 100 most powerful women and as high as number 2. But you're number 1 in my book, just for the record. She's also ranked as one of the most powerful women in business consistently, has been recognized several times as one of the best CEOs in the world. She's a board member of Amazon and the Partnership for Public Service, where the two of us serve together. She led PepsiCo from being a very good company to being a great company with a performance with purpose mantra that we're going to discuss today. I think that notion of performance with purpose, as she applied it at PepsiCo, can apply to everyone on this call in terms of how they think about their career journey, performing with a sense of purpose. In India, and I apologize, they could read this in Google, I know, but anyway, in India, she used to play cricket, and she also played in an all-girl band and she was a guitar player. Do you still play?
Never.
Okay.
I've become vain. Mm.
Always, Indra, as you'll discover in this call, she always has a thoughtful point of view. She's never at a loss for words, and she's always clear thinking and clear feeling as she ponders issues of substance. So with that, I want to turn it over to you, Indra, and you can correct anything I said or amplify on it. One thing I think would be helpful for our audience is if you could highlight a little bit of the PepsiCo piece of this, because we'll get into that as we go forward. So over to you.
Thank you, Doug. Thank you for having me, and it's a pleasure being with you. And Amy Federman, good to meet you too. You talked about my being with PepsiCo all those years, but let me just sketch for you what PepsiCo was and is today. When I joined PepsiCo in 1994, it was a three-legged stool. It had the snack food business, all the Frito-Lay snacks, Lay's, Doritos, Cheetos. It had the beverage business, Pepsi, Mountain Dew, all that stuff. Then it had a big restaurant business, KFC, Taco Bell, Pizza Hut, and a whole bunch of casual dining concepts like California Pizza Kitchen, Chevy's. It was a big business. And the company was not quite a third, but somewhat a third with, restaurants, beverages, and snacks. The company had about 500,000 employees because restaurants had a lot of employees. And it was a company focused on convenience. All the restaurant business were quick serve, snacks, beverages, all focused on convenience. Interestingly, I got there in 94 and we had the first crisis with restaurants. And as I got my feet wet, I was asked to take a deep dive into the restaurant business, which was an eye-opening exercise for myself because I never worked in restaurants. So I really got to understand the restaurant business and very quickly came to the conclusion, working with Roger Enrico, who was the CEO at that time, that the restaurant business was a high-touch service business. Snacks and beverages were a packaged goods company, which was a very different operating model than a restaurant model. And it was incumbent on us to separate restaurants from the packaged goods because we almost had to unfetter the restaurant business from a packaged goods culture and let them have their own culture, because a service business with a packaged goods business doesn't go together. And so this was not getting rid of a bad business, it's actually unfettering a good business from another good business. And then that business went on to be Yum and then Tricon Restaurants and did exceedingly well under David Novak, then Greg Creed, and now a new leader. Then we had the snack food and the beverage business. And later on, we added Quaker Oats, which is more of a breakfast business, a good for you business, because our snacks and beverages were mostly fun for you. Products that brought a smile to your face. Everything we do brings a smile to your face, but these were fun for you products. Quaker Oats was all good for you products. So we added Quaker Oats in the year 2000. And then we kept adding good for you products and operating PepsiCo to be a company that gave consumers choice. If you wanted a fun for you product, we have it. If you wanted better for you, we have it. If you wanted good for you, we have it. All day parts, all convenient, all ubiquitously available, all priced very affordably. That was really the goal of PepsiCo. And so it was a privilege being in the company. It was a youthful company with a great culture. And it was a bigger privilege to lead the company and make it stronger for the decades ahead.
Okay. Well, it's helpful for our audience. As you know, I was in this business and I watched the evolution of PepsiCo. And there were not many believers out there that believed that either Coke or PepsiCo could ever pivot to a place where they could be having better for you and good for you conversation. It was not credible within the industry. But by creating a higher sense of purpose over time, I believe that's, along with all the other work you did, that enabled you to sort of have a different conversation within the industry and with your consumers. So we'll get into that. But I've asked everyone, it's been very interesting. I've asked everyone on the panel every day the first two questions. And and then I have two specific questions for you, and then we're going to open it up to the phone lines.
Mhm.
But for now, you've got to put up with me. The first question looks at the macro situation we have. As a society, we seem to be in uncharted water. We are in uncharted waters for our generation in terms of personal, social, economic, and organizational chaos. And the question is, how would you characterize the situation that we're facing today?
See, Doug, you're right, and maybe I would change it around to make it more positive. There's no question that the COVID pandemic brought the whole world to an existential crisis, because we've never been in this moment of stillness as a global society in our times. The last time was the Spanish flu. We didn't even come close to the way we shut down for COVID. So it was an incredible change from a vibrant global economy to all of a sudden the whole world sort of deflating. So it was a scary time. It was an unsettling time, all of that. But I'll tell you something, big moments like this actually fuel a lot of innovation, invention, change. So I'd say that we were in uncharted waters, but it's personal, social, economic, and organizational change, not chaos. Because I think chaos, you can look at it positively or negatively. You can say chaos is, oh my God, the world is coming to an end. Or you can say, God, chaos is going to lead to change, which means there's opportunity. And just think of all the industries that have come up because of the so-called chaos.
Yeah.
Years of change have been truncated into 1 year. For example, technology like Zoom, what we're talking about now. We've had video conferencing and teleconferencing for years. All of a sudden, it's become the most common technology to use, and people are investing to improve the quality of the technology. And that in turn is enabling work from home and more flexible work hours. It's causing enormous change in society, positive change. Rather than call it chaos because of work from home, you can say, my God, it's enabling more family and work interactions. So I think, yes, we've gone through a change, but if you look at it as it's just accelerated change that was likely to happen over time. And look at it through that lens, you'll actually look at the silver linings in a lot of the things that have happened rather than, say, oh my God, society's changed forever. I don't recognize it. Hey, maybe it's a good thing.
Yeah, well, and change, it certainly has accelerated, and there are certainly silver linings abound. We had Stephen M.R. Covey on Monday, and he was talking about how Zoom has enabled leaders to connect with their entire enterprise.
Yeah.
Real time. When I was a CEO or a chairman, you'd have to have a big meeting and call everybody in, or you would send out something on your portal that would go to all employees. But you couldn't they couldn't see you. They couldn't connect with you like we can connect now. He said this actually, the Zoom technology, was enhancing leaders' ability to build trust and to create direct lines of communication to the frontline workers who so long have been left out.
But Doug, what I do miss is the shaking of hands, giving people a hug, having that human interaction. Because I tell you, my biggest fear, even though I think work from home and flexibility and Zoom has given us incredible benefits, what I worry is that when people start to come back to the office, some people will come back to the office, others won't. And I don't want to create two classes of workers where people who come to the office are going to be judged one way and people that don't get judged a different way. And, unless you have a human interaction, you don't know who's a good people developer and who's not a good people developer. In fact, I'd go so far as to say, in the past, we used to think that you needed to be on site to learn hard skills, and soft skills you can learn anywhere. Now it's the opposite. You can do hard skills via remote learning, but for soft skills, you need to be in the room with others. How do you lead? How do you develop? How do you coach? How do you mentor? How do you read people's body language? So I think it's opened up incredible opportunities and requires us to think carefully about what it is we need to navigate over the next few months as the society comes back to normal as we knew it.
Well, and I would build on that. My observation would also be that we are just learning how to leverage Zoom technology, and our understanding will become more nuanced, and our ability to connect with each other will become better. There's no replacing in person, but it will become better over time. And in my own personal experience over the last year, I am so much more comfortable with these kind of exchanges than I was originally, and I see that being written about and reported by many folks. Let me move on to the next question. In our blueprint, and I believe you won't disagree with this, we assert that the key for leaders to navigate in this changing world is to make sure they have a strong personal leadership foundation that honors both their expectations of themselves and the expectations of the organization in terms of their contribution profile. It's not one or the other. You know, it's what works for you, but also what works for the organization. And what we found is that the people that the leaders that are excelling are people that have a deep and personal, purpose-driven foundation. They do have a performance orientation. You know, they want to contribute, and they want to do it better than the other person. Okay. What do you see as some of the essential characteristics that leaders have to bring to the table today?
This is one where how you interpret this foundation question can mean a lot. And let me explain something. If I go back to the 80s and the 90s, some of the big leaders that we talk about even today as revered leaders started off with a leadership purpose which said, I want to build the greatest enterprise defined as I'm going to have 15% earnings growth every quarter.
Yeah.
My belief is that everybody focus on a few priorities, the vital few. I don't care how you do it, we're going to do 15%.
Sound like Jack Welch to me.
I'm not, look, somebody, all right?
Yeah.
And I'm going to build businesses. I don't care how much I invest in the existing businesses. I'm going to build new businesses, which may be completely different than what I have, but 15% is the mantra. And guess what? All of us in society said he is the greatest CEO of our times, of modern corporate America. It didn't matter that effluents were dumped into rivers. It didn't matter that stuff was thrown into the environment. It didn't matter that the company that CEO left behind was shaky. But we celebrated those kind of leaders. And there were not just one, there were 4 or 5 or 6 who did moving around numbers to make the numbers and were lauded. To me, that is not a foundation, Doug. To me, a foundation that you should have goes back to the character of the corporation. What is the role of the corporation? What is the company supposed to do? Is a company purely supposed to set a performance number and just hit it quarter after quarter, irrespective of how you get those numbers and irrespective of the cost to society? Or should you take a holistic perspective and say the success of the company and the success of societies that which it operates in are linked? In which case, you'll have a more holistic perspective of how am I running this company to benefit society over the long term? Very, very different perspective. But it can't be just the CEO. This is something the board has to have a great sensitivity to, because the board has to pick the right CEO for that.
Yeah.
And if you don't run the company outside in as much as inside out, with a view to what's happening in the world, the changes in the world, and how do I transform my company to the future with a view to the future, you know, the company will have a short lifespan. So you asked me about PepsiCo. The consumer was moving towards diet products, which are better for you and good for you products with positive nutrition. When the market is moving that way, if we stayed just with fun for you and try to grow that business, growth will slow down at some point.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you can cut costs, you can fire people, you can deliver numbers for 5 or 6 years. And then you'd retire as a CEO, let the next person pick up the ruins of what you've done.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't hire the right CEO who says, hey, wait a minute, I know that the world is changing. We have to spend some to transform the company, because every CEO should run the company for the duration of a company, which is forever, not for the duration of the CEO. Because it's very easy, Doug, to run a company for 5 or 6 years, cut, slash, and burn. At the end of 5 or 6 years says, adios, I'm leaving. Let somebody else pick up the debris. And many CEOs do that. Boom, splat, boom, splat. That's what's expected from CEOs. The new guy comes and takes a huge reset. Everybody claps, saying that's the right way to do it. Everybody writes the alpha. And just as the CEO is supposed to retire, they sell the stock. So that game has got to stop. So I think the foundation that you set has to be based on the society in which you operated, the kind of company you want to be, and a company that lasts forever, as opposed to a company that, just runs for the short term and then runs out of steam.
No, I couldn't agree with you more. Illustratively, we would publish at Campbell, we would publish 2 reports on our portal to all employees. One was our annual report, and one was our corporate social responsibility report. And nobody opened the annual report. Everybody opened the corporate social responsibility report, and they shared it with their kids,
Exactly right.
other family members, and they were voting. They're saying this is important. You see, companies exist within a societal context. You exist to serve society, and you need to reflect the expectations of society, or you risk your company's at risk. So I couldn't agree with you more.
The one thing I would add there is,
Yeah.
it's very important that corporate social responsibility is not interpreted as giving away the money you make. Because some people say we'll make profits, we'll give some to some charities in 4 or 5 places, and I feel great. That is almost like going to confession. You do everything wrong, and then you just give, at the end you give some money away. I'm saying a company with a deep sense of purpose transforms the way it makes money, not the way it gives the money away. Very different.
Very different, and very well put. I sort of want to push a little further. I'm going to go into the third question here. You have become the poster child, whether you like it or not, for the concept of successfully leading a company under the words performance with purpose. It seems to me that same concept can be applied to any organization unit. If you're running a team, performance with purpose. If you're running an operating unit or a division, performance with purpose. Can you elaborate just a little bit more on your performance with purpose philosophy and how it sort of fits into how one shows up every day as a leader?
When I first took over as CEO of PepsiCo in 2006, I was thinking about how to frame the direction of the company for the next decades. And I was thinking in decades, it doesn't matter whether I'm CEO or not, I just want to frame the company's future over decades. And as I was looking at it, I said, first, let me think about the world and the society in which we operate in. And let me frame PepsiCo's direction based on that. And what did I find? I found that people were changing their eating and drinking habits. They were eating healthier. They wanted less sugar, less fat, less salt. They wanted to eat stuff that had positive nutrients. They were worried about, health concerns overall. Every country in the world that I went to, I saw a lot of plastic waste. I grew up myself water-starved, and I saw how much water we use in our operations. That gave me cause for concern. And then as I looked at our young people, exactly as you said, Doug, we're all in a talent war. If we wanted the best and the brightest, we had to bring people in that felt proud to come to work for PepsiCo, for what we stood for, and then could bring their whole self to work. So as I put all of that together, I said, look, PepsiCo is a high performance company and will always be a high performance company. But we need to do 3 other things. One, we need to invest in portfolio transformation so that we can reduce the salt, fat, and sugar in our products. And we had a lot of them. We need to dial up the 0 sugar, lower calorie products. And we need to add a whole bunch of nutrition products. That should be the strategy of the company. And on products, that was called human sustainability. How do we sustain the human race? The second part was environmental sustainability. Reduce plastic use, reduce water use, reduce greenhouse gases. Sustainable farming. How do we make sure we make farmers more sustainable? That was environmental sustainability. The third was talent sustainability. How do we create an environment where everybody could bring themselves to work. What was interesting about the three legs of purpose was that unless you delivered performance, you couldn't sustain purpose. Unless you delivered purpose, you couldn't sustain performance. So performance and purpose were self-reinforcing, and they were a virtuous circle. And so performance with purpose became very, very important to the company. It resonated with everybody. And in the 12 years I was there, performance with purpose was on the cover of every annual report. And we told people what we were going to do. We invested behind it. We provided scorecards on our progress. So we told them what we were going to do by when. And when we couldn't deliver something, we explained why we didn't make the goal. So we worked towards that. What was the consequence of it? The consequence of it was that we had to make some tough changes to our portfolio, major investments. While we were making some of those investments, a couple of years we underperformed. And we got killed for it. But you don't back off when you're on a major transformation from your core agenda to transform the company just because a couple of years you underperformed a basket of companies who are really not even companies you should be comparing yourself with.
Mm-hmm.
And so our board was fantastic. They were steadfast that this was the direction of the company. When the critics came calling, they said, we know exactly what we're doing. Go away, we're going to keep going. And over the period, PepsiCo performed very well. And I think that we outperformed pretty much the S&P 500, our peer group index. We did quite well. So I feel good about where we came from, which was a great company. We remained a great company, but a different company. So,
And I imagine you were able to attract talent given that proposition. So, the talent you were able to attract, I suspect you were also able to develop and retain that talent in a way that might have been more difficult had you not had that sense of purpose. Do you think that's
so
true?
we attracted talent because people said, PepsiCo is not just a sort of a junk food kind of company that has a great product lineup, is doing all the right things for the environment. But the reason we retain talent, especially diverse talent, especially women, is because we did a lot of things to allow young family builders to also have a family. We provided all kinds of programs for flexibility, for on-site, near-site childcare, adoption services, maternity, paternity leave, everything that allowed family building. Because at the end of the day, if you don't have families, we don't have future consumers. So we had a view that we had to allow young people to have a family and to come to work, men and women. Yeah. So we created an environment where people love to come to work at PepsiCo. To me, the best sign, Doug, is I come to work early in the morning and I'd look at people coming to work through the entry doors in the headquarter campus. And I see them all smiling when they came to work. It was energy in the company that was fantastic. And I'd walk the corridors in the headquarters building. It's really unbelievable how people felt great about working at PepsiCo.
And so many people think that that's just a pipe dream. I ran a canned soup company in the poorest, most dangerous city in the United States. And we had employees with a spring in their step too.
Uh-huh.
You can create those kind of environments, but I would say they do have to be purpose-driven. And you've just reinforced two of the points that we often make. The first point would be that if you want people to care about your agenda, you better damn well show that you care about theirs.
Most certainly.
And it's also possible to be very tough-minded on standards, because I know you. Tough-minded on standards and tender-hearted with people. You had high standards for performance. You were willing to create flexibility for them, but it wasn't at the expense of getting the work done. You said, we've got to figure out a way to do all of this. And
That's
I'll
right.
work with you on it. And they took that and ran with it because you created flexibility for them to live a full life while they delivered for you, which
absolutely
was so cool.
Yeah. The only thing I tell you in retrospect, as I think back at all the work, there are two things that perhaps I have done a little bit differently. Mm-hmm. One is that I had a sense of perfection. You talk about letting go of perfection. Nobody knows what perfection really is. But I felt that, there's one statement that somebody made once I took to heart. The distance between a number one and a number two is a constant. So if you want to pull up the organization, you've got to pull yourself up. So I'd always push people to do a better and better job.
Yeah.
I think our Tom Knights told us at the last partnership meeting that A people hire A people and B talent hires C talent. And so to me, if you want A talent in the company, you've got to make yourself A plus or A double plus to hire the best talent. So what happened is I pushed people to have better and better output, quality of output to go up. The question I often ask myself, did I have to push them that much? Okay, I don't know the answer. I don't know how to do it any other way. I don't know the answer. The second one is urgency. If I said I'd like this done by end of the week, could I have given them another 3 days? I always felt it was due on the 10th, get it done by the 7th so we can sort of let it ferment in your head for 2 or 3 days. But this sense of perfection and urgency, I sit back and say, could I have dialed a little of those back? I don't know, Doug. I was wired a certain way and I wasn't going to change.
But you were true to yourself, and I think that's
True.
a key ingredient here. If you had done it any other way, it would have been false. I mean,
I agree.
people would, and you wouldn't have been happy, and if you weren't happy, they wouldn't have been happy. So
That's right.
I would not go back and second guess myself on that. I would say though that I think we all. I mean, in our model on the blueprint, the last step is improve, and we challenge everybody to ask themselves every day, how can I do better?
Yep.
And that was the culture we wanted to create. That's the culture that I think we want in federal government. We want it in nonprofits. We want it in for-profits.
Yeah.
This mindset of continuous improvement and thinking about, well, that was good. Now, how can we do a little bit better tomorrow?
Yeah.
And to me, while doing that with a strong sense of purpose.
Right.
So I'm going to do better, but the guardrails for me to do better are governed by my sense of purpose.
Right. Exactly right.
So you created the guardrails, and then you challenged the organization to go up at a certain rate. Maybe some people couldn't have kept up with that, but they could be somewhere else too. I have found, I was introduced at a World 50 event years ago, and they said, and here's Doug Conant, and he's recruited in 8 people that have gone on to be CEOs. And I was thinking, that's not right. I've gotten more than that. So we started counting, and we're up to 43 people who have gone on to be CEOs of things. And when I think about that, we had high standards, and we had it wasn't easy. We had high standards, but what really worked was ultimately, if you're getting A talent, they have to be asking the question of themselves, how can I do better?
Right.
And so my question with all of them was, well, how can you do better? And I think you did the same thing at Pepsi, and you did it a whole lot better than I did.
I don't know. I think the biggest interesting was a lot of people who went on to big CEO jobs. They would tell me, or their board members would say, when they got stuck on a problem, they would typically sit down and say, let's stop and think about what would Indra do in this situation.
Well,
I'm like, oh, okay. So obviously I did teach you something there. So in spite of all of this pushing and pushing and pushing I did of people, at least you've left this thing about, let's stop and think about how would Indra approach this problem? Because at the end of the day, Doug, all that we're teaching is a way of thinking. We're not giving people an answer. Right. We're teaching them how to think differently about a problem, reframe the problem, zoom out before you zoom in. We're teaching them all those skills. Yeah. So as long as you don't give them the answer, but teach them how to think, I think it's a good thing that'll keep, stay with them forever.
Yeah, and this gets me to my last point, and then we're going to open up the phone lines in about 5 minutes. But you're exhibiting right now some traits that I think are essential for leaders to succeed today. One of them is humility, and saying, how could I do? What did I do? Could I have done better there? And reflecting on experiences and realizing that there's always more to learn, and trying to be a learning person and modeling that learning behavior every day in the office and asking, what do you think? What do you think? Inviting people in. I think humility is important. You touched on another one that I think you exhibited in spades when there were a lot of doubting Toms and doubting Thomasinas. Courage, because people say you can't do that at PepsiCo. You're sugar water and salty snacks. You can't. Don't talk to me about good for you or making better. Well, who are you kidding? But you had the courage of your convictions. I would argue that leads me to a third thing is you had done your homework and you were well grounded in what you were doing, which is what enabled you to be so courageous when you did it. So I think of leaders being effective today. I think you've got to be well grounded in your convictions. You got to do your homework. And then you've got to be courageous and champion that. But at the same time, you have to be humble enough to keep learning so that you don't cling to a strategy that works today, but might be a misstep tomorrow.
Absolutely correct. 100% correct.
So what else are some of the most effective leaders you're seeing today that are, what are they doing that's helping them excel?
Curiosity. I'm going to tell you that if you don't have insatiable curiosity, it doesn't work. I mean, you started off asking about the chaos around the world. Don't just say this chaos. Get curious. Go study it. Why did this happen? The COVID crisis. Understand all about it. Understand all of the opportunities that it's going to create. Have this childlike curiosity. Ask the why 5, 6, 7 times. I think you'll find that the number of opportunities out there in the world, the number of ways you can intervene to make the world a better place are just waiting for you to do something with. I think very often, when you're a baby, you look at it and say, why is the sky so high? Why is it blue? Why is the bird flying? And they ask the same question 10 times. And as a parent, we answer it. Sometimes as we get older, we don't ask those questions. We don't seek.
We start answering them for someone else, which is not good.
Well, we start answering those questions even before they ask the question. Okay, and so I think that we have to learn as grown-ups, we have to learn to have that childlike curiosity all over again, and learn to search for answers, search for information to get us to the right answers. And I think great leaders have that incredible sense of curiosity and outside-in perspective and a healthy dose of empathy. And if they don't have those three, you'll end up being, a leader not for the ages, but a leader for the short term. And there's many of them.
Sure. One other thing I might add to that, and then Amy, get ready. We're trying to stay on time here. Indra's distracting me, but it's all her fault. But as you're talking, the other thing that I've observed is creating a community like that. It's not just about you as an individual.
Right.
At PepsiCo, one of the hallmarks of the company was you had a community of people that were bright, talented, curious, hungry to do better. And that community is more powerful than any one individual. And
there's something about PepsiCo that everybody bleeds blue. I mean, it's an unusual culture. It infects you. It's a great company that way. And so, everybody wants to be a super performer. It's a youthful culture. It's an unusual company, Doug. I mean, I cannot explain PepsiCo. I had an irrational love affair with it.
Well, and in your case, the shoe fit. When I was the CEO of Campbell, Herb Kelleher, who passed away a few years ago from Southwest Airlines. Herb had started his career at Campbell. And the people at Southwest Airlines, Herb would always talk to Jim Parker, the person who succeeded him as CEO. He would say, why can't we be more like Campbell Soup Company? Be curious and trying to change the world. Now, Herb was back in a different era when Campbell Soup Company was going, but he brought that same kind of curiosity and that community of learning and making a difference to Southwest Airlines and made his mark there. So I think all of these traits together are are the kind of things that our audience should be thinking about as they craft their own careers.
Mhm.
I've done my time here, so I'm turning it over to Amy. And Amy, I bet we have a question or two. Knowing Indra, we probably have a lot. It's just your perspective is going to trigger a lot of conversation. Go ahead, Amy.
We do. Thank you both. And for all these questions, I'll start with you, Indra, and then Doug, if you want to build.
Okay.
We have a question here from Barbara. Indra, I remember in your early days at Pepsi, you had some pushback from Wall Street analysts, and I think you alluded to this during our program. How are you able to overcome that?
Again, you'll always have pushback. If you don't deliver super duper performance that they think is sustainable, that they think, it may not be reality. If you don't deliver on their reality, there will be pushback. The thing is, you have to articulate your strategy outside in, not inside out. You have to get your board completely on your side, get them to buy into the strategy. Make sure you communicate it in a way that your whole organization understands it. And then go off executing on it. Don't back off. Good strategic transformations take a few years to execute. And if you don't stay on that path, anything you do, people think a little bit of criticism, you'll change direction, which is not the way to run a company. We were on a strategic transformation. We had to keep going. But it's that ecosystem of support, along with my own framing of what we were doing, which is what allowed us to face the criticism. Now, I'll be honest with you. When you get all this criticism, you feel terrible, absolutely terrible. And then it gets personal. They'll talk about women shouldn't be running these big companies. You get all kinds of crap like that. And women get a disproportionate amount of negative criticism, I should tell you that, in the media, in newspapers, from investors. But at the end of the day, I didn't look at myself as a woman CEO. I looked at myself as a person who's been given keys to PepsiCo. And I was responsible for leaving behind a great company whenever I left. And so I was on a mission.
Well, I'm just going to build on that from an outside in perspective. You also, in order to have that kind of courage, you had done your homework and you had really thoroughly studied the environment you were in, where it was headed, and how you fit and where you needed to go in order to create superior value over time, leveraging what you did well. So the reason I believe you succeeded was because you'd done your homework and then you got everyone aligned. And you could have the courage of your convictions again. So anyone listening, you want to operate, you want to be on purpose, you want to have the courage of your convictions, but you darn well better make sure you've done your homework first. And
totally, yes.
Thoroughly prepared. You've been curious. You've asked all the questions 6 ways from Sunday until the people in the room are probably tired of you asking the question. Didn't you ask that question already? But you need to have that kind of dialogue inside before you take that kind of thinking outside.
Yep.
It's mission critical. Yeah.
Completely agree with you.
Okay, Amy.
Thank you both.
Another one.
We have a question here from Roger. Effective leadership, including self-leadership, depends on clarity of language, the way we talk about principles and practices. What have you found to be good ways to help people articulate ideas like purpose and then translate those ideas into habitual behaviors?
Very often I read a lot of books about purpose. They talk about it theoretically, and they talk about it like it's some management doctrine or some management mumbo jumbo. I think especially when it comes to purpose, you've got to talk about it in a very personal way so that people can engage head, heart, hands. You've got to engage people's hearts. I'll give you the best example. At our shareholder meeting, one particular group used to show up to complain about our water use. And they'd bring with them a whole bunch of letters from children who've written about our water use. And, we get very few, critics, but this one would come every year. So one year I looked at them and I said, thank you for coming all the way from a certain city far away to our shareholders meeting. And thank you for all these letters. But have any of you grown up in a water distressed area? Any of you? No. I told them, do you know that I grew up in a water distressed area where for the first 20 years of my life, you know, the family would get water from 4 a.m. to 5 a.m. through trickles in the taps. And we had to figure out how to fill pots and pans with water and allocate it to the members of the family. That was for everything, bathing, washing clothes, everything. You learn how to live with little water. And when you've grown up that way, you have a deeper sense of water use than doing what my kids do today, have half an hour showers. I've never had a 2-minute shower because there wasn't enough water. You learn to scrunch up a little bit of water and take a bath. So when people have grown up with much, come and talk about how we need to save water to a CEO who grew up without much water. That doesn't ring true. So in my case, I felt water deeply in my bones, and I pushed the company to reduce water usage, not just in our plants, in the communities in which we operated. Farmers reduced water use, rainwater harvesting. How do you build check dams? We worked on communities to improve water. So I think it's very, very important that you make it very personal and you relate to purpose. If you don't relate to purpose and just say, I'm going to do purpose, because that's the philosophy du jour, it won't work. People will know you're a fake.
Yeah. I build on that. In the blueprint, we talk about declaring yourself. Part of it is doing the work inside to figure out what's important to you. And in this case, Indra's looking at water use is important. I feel it. And that guides behavior. But if you really want to live purpose, you have to declare that. You have to tell people. So many of the people we work with and coach have this powerful sense of purpose, but they're reticent to declare themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And so part of it is you have to do the reflection, and then you have to get the words that speak to you, and then you have to tell people. And then you have to do what you say you're going to do. So if you want to talk purpose, you've got to be reflective, you've got to declare yourself, and then you have to execute. And then you have to learn from that and think about, well, how can I do better the next time as I stay on purpose? And
if you don't put points on the board on all of these programs you articulate, people will think it's just hollow. It's not just points on the board. You've got to show the investments that you're going to make, the programs you're going to execute, and then the results you're getting.
That's good.
Because you can't just say, I'm going to reduce water use by 1 liter per liter of Pepsi, and then not put the monies behind it and the talent behind it. So you've got to show how you're building towards a program of water reduction.
Sometimes I think people are just expecting a tweet, Indra. It's just going to say, we're going to do this much, and don't worry, we'll take care of it. But we know better. We have another question, Amy?
Yes, thank you both. We have a question from Danielle. You touched on this a little bit in your answer to our first question. How did you navigate through the business world as a woman leader in the C-suite? What guidance would you provide to leaders today?
Look, when I came into the workforce in the United States, there were very few women in the workforce. I've never had a woman boss, And there were very few women peers, when I was rising through the workforce. And when I became CEO, there were only 11 companies with women CEOs. And I was the first Fortune 50 company to be a woman CEO of a Fortune 50 company. So in some ways I was a novelty. In some ways it was a scary proposition because I was not just a woman, I was also an immigrant woman of color. So I was, all the strikes I had against me. What you have to do at that point is people are not going to have different performance expectations of you because you're a woman or an immigrant or a person of color. They're just going to say you're a CEO. Show us the results. So you've got to rise above everything and focus on what you're going to do with the company. Now, let me tell you where I think my woman immigrant status helped. I had that immigrant fear. So I was always putting myself in a hole, thinking that I was always in a hole and that I had to dig myself out of the hole and then rise. So my performance was always better than most because I was in the hole, coming out of the hole, and then doing better. So I had this performance improvement or performance delivery that was very, very good. And that helped a lot. Had I not had that and had the sense of bravado, I can do anything, I don't think I'd have done as well as I did.
I can't talk about that, but I can corroborate your story. I had 28 bosses in my career, and one was a woman. They had 28 bosses, and they were all men. So I basically worked 57 out of the 58 bosses I had, or 50, no, 56, 55 out of the 56 bosses I had were men. And I delight in seeing the way the world's evolving now. We had Joanne Lublin on the other day. She's just launching her new book called Power Moms, which builds off of her Earning It work that we've done earlier. And Joanne and I both graduated around the same time from Northwestern University. And we were commenting as we were doing the interview how times have changed, and which we delight in, and they need to change so much more. But many of the people in the audience hadn't seen that kind of change because they were younger, and so much has transpired. There wasn't somebody like Indra Nooyi to talk to. There wasn't anybody there. And
Indra Nooyi had nobody to talk to either.
Well, I would have talked to you anytime. You know, it's just too bad we only met. You were, I think, the CFO at.
Yeah, but Doug, you know something? Because of history, because that's how companies evolved.
Yeah.
Men had men's clubs you could talk to, boys' clubs. Women had no such clubs. Yeah. So it was kind of a lonely existence. I'll be honest with you.
Well, and as you know, my successor at Campbell was a woman, Denise Morrison, and she had the same kind of pioneering challenge you did. I had a different challenge. I was an introvert, and I wasn't part of those clubs, those men's clubs. I had no interest in that. But it was an easier journey than the one you had. Next question.
Great, thank you both. We have a question here from an anonymous attendee. Over the years, as you pursued your goals in a busy, challenging world, how did you balance or at least integrate your personal and professional lives?
You know, it's not easy because your personal life is a full-time job. Being a mom is a full-time job. Being a wife is a full-time job. For me, being a daughter and a daughter-in-law in an Indian family is a full-time job. And being a CEO is like 3 full-time jobs rolled into one. And so you're always juggling, compromising, reprioritizing, straddling, you know, you're doing all the INGs. It's really tough. But how does it help? If you have the right spouse who's willing to take a load off of you, that helps. And when I got married, my husband and I had lovely conversations about how we were going to help each other. And he's always been an equal partner with me. So that's helped a lot. You talk about letting go of perfection. You know, you have to let go of perfection. Now, when I got home, I was never the perfectly coiffed wife waiting for the husband. I just wasn't that way. So I was like, hey, I'm exhausted. That's what you get. And so I let go of perfection. Did I miss some of the children's school events? I was there for all the important ones. I missed others. Okay, it just happened. I used family, a lot of relatives to come help us, because it's important that you have some family ecosystem to give you comfort that when you're not there, they'll cover for you. And so multi-generational living was common in our life. I mean, I come from an Asian background. To us, that's very normal. So there was an ecosystem of support that I deployed. Did it have its challenges? Yeah, it had its challenges. But you know what? If I balanced the challenges with the opportunities, the challenges were so few relative to the opportunities that I was afforded. So somehow we made it work. But I will just tell you, family should be a source of strength. We've made it a source of stress. And we have to change that. We have to change, having a family should be a source of strength, and we should enable young people to have families and somehow balance families and working, outside the home. We have to create an environment for that. The whole care infrastructure has to be addressed. That's a whole different topic.
Yeah, there's a lot of studies. There's a particular study that indicates that cultures with strong families have less crime and have more prosperity.
Hmm.
Family makes a difference. And so I couldn't agree with you more there. And I would say, just as a working man, I think you have to be intentional with how you lead your life. And you have to say, this is what matters most to me.
Mhm.
And so if you sort of say that to yourself and to your partner and to your family, you say, this matters most, and I'm going to say no to things in order to be at these things. And you commit to them, and then you have to show up and do it. But you have to be, to navigate this well, I think you have to be very intentional. You can't do it by the seat of your pants. So many people I work with, and we work with in Conant Leadership, are sort of running their lives by the seat of their pants, reacting to what comes. Oh, I can't get to that one. I'm going to go to this, and on the important, and we all spend half our days by the seat of our pants. But the other half of the day, we need to know what matters most. And we need to make commitments to ourselves and our families to be there. So
But Doug, I'll just say one thing to you, and take this the right way. Most 99% of the men who grew up in the generation that we're talking about, the millennial men, have no idea what their spouses went through to keep the family going. It was an incredible sacrifice they all made to keep the families going. It was a real work. And when you have working women, like I grew up in the same millennial generation, the pressures on us, I don't think 99% of the men understand the pressures. And so I think, we not just face family pressures, we also face bias at work. Women of our generations and subsequently face all kinds of little biases at work. So you let those biases eat away at you. It affects your confidence, which in turn starts to impact your competence. You go through that angst. You have to worry about the kids calling you. You've got to deal with all of that. And you go home. You can't leave the job at home. You can't leave your kids and say, hey, I got to worry about the work. You've got to learn to create segments in your head for everything, which in the case of most of the ideal worker of the 70s, 80s, 90s, and the 2000s was the husband working and the wife at home. And the men had it really good.
Yeah, and I totally agree. The only thing I'm saying is, whoever's in the audience here, just because you're a male doesn't mean you can just say, well, I've got it good. And you have to be intentional, and you have to be intentional in a way that creates room for your partner to do what she needs to do.
And today's men are becoming more involved, and I'm finding young men are really trying to be part of the family and trying to have equality at home. It's a great, I see it and it feels very good.
Okay, that's good. Yeah. We've got time for, I think, maybe 2 more questions, Amy, and then we'll wrap up.
Sure. And I love what you said about family should be a source of strength, not stress. I'm going to take that with me. We have a question here from Renata. What are the key skills, or are there any key skills from your experience at BCG that you use in your board roles today?
My 6.5 years at BCG, I wouldn't replace it for anything else in the world, because it taught me so much. It taught me how to go into any industry and develop a perspective of the value drivers in the industry. It taught me how to take a framework from one industry and apply it to another industry. So BCG added about 6 or 8 years to my corporate career because it taught me so much in such a short time. It also taught me how to come up with interesting new analytic methods. It taught me how to have a nose for data. I can look at data and say, does it make sense or not? How to apply a smell test. It was the most unbelievable experience, because BCG as a strategy consulting firm is also a very high integrity firm. I remember being in meetings where the client would say, I don't buy those conclusions. The CEO would say, I don't buy those conclusions. And the BCG team, from the partner down, will say, this is what the analysis says. Let's figure out how you can shape the messaging to your team, because it's different than what you've been saying, but we are not going to redo the analysis to suit your point of view. So there was an intellectual honesty and integrity to the work that BCG did. And I believe that's what makes that firm so unique. And even though I left it way back in 1986, all of those fine teachings, what they taught me about integrity in your work, carry through even today.
And I would say to everyone in our audience, seek cultures like that. Seek cultures of bright people who are curious and have integrity early in your career, and
Yep.
focus on just learning. And it will serve you well for the rest of your career. So
Yep.
seek out those kind of environments.
Great, thank you.
Last question, Amy.
Yes, this is definitely top of mind of leaders. We've gotten some variation of this question every day. With the current COVID crisis, what key qualities do you think successful companies have demonstrated to sustain their ongoing success?
You know, COVID has actually opened up enormous opportunities for some companies to gouge the consumers, I should say, because you can price PPE at ridiculous prices. You can increase prices of toilet paper and paper towels, even food. You can raise the prices. So I think COVID is going to test the true character of a company. Are you going to gouge the consumer because the consumer is in a vulnerable state? Or are you going to be more sympathetic, empathetic to the consumer and say, wait a minute, now's not the time to effect extraordinary price increases, and make sure that you focus on availability, your supply chain, as opposed to how do I create scarcity and ramp up the pricing. So you can go industry by industry. And unfortunately, some people have done it right. Other people have gone and extracted extraordinary monies. I'll give you an example. Your COVID testing. You know, a COVID test, 30, 40 bucks for a very expensive COVID test. Take a look at your hospital bill when you do a COVID test, which is not a drive-through testing. You know, real a hospital does your test. They'll probably charge you several $100s for that COVID test. So you sit there going, stop. I understand hospitals have to make money, but don't do it during COVID periods. Don't extract so much of a premium out of the consumer. And so I think COVID challenged us to have a big heart while keeping performance in mind. I'm not suggesting walking away from performance, but don't try to get extraordinary returns in a pandemic period. Goes back to the character of the company. Okay. Some companies did it well. Some companies worried about their employees. Do they have childcare? Do they know what to do? Do they know, are they getting meals when they're in quarantine? They're worried about all these things. Other companies said it's your problem. And so I think COVID actually separated the great companies from the okay companies.
Just to build on it, you know, if you're running a unit, an organization, or a company, the first question I would ask is, how can we help? And then the spirit I would bring to that conversation would be one of honoring all the stakeholders.
Uh-huh.
If you're there helping and honoring,
Mm-hmm.
you will find your way. If you're there for any other motive, if you're exploiting, you will lose your way.
Mm-hmm.
And let me tell you, if you start on that path as a company, you're at risk, because once you start that behavior, you can't contain it, because you've modeled to your employees that we're here to take advantage of situations. And to rein that in is incredibly difficult. You're on a slippery slope.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got to be really tough-minded on this. We're here to help, and we're going to honor you, and we're going to perform well. And we're not compromising on any of those three things.
True.
So I couldn't agree with you more, Indra. Unfortunately, well, probably fortunately for you, we're going to let you go in just a second. I want to thank you, and I'm going to turn it back to Amy, who's going to wrap up, and then we'll sign off. So 1 minute, please. Go ahead, Amy.
Great. I want to thank you, Indra, again for being with us today. Thanks for your insights and your time. And thank you to all of our attendees for your commitment to the craft of leadership. I want to tell you about some exciting ways to engage with Conant Leadership's suite of training and content this year. But first, make sure to follow Indra Nooyi on social media. She's on LinkedIn and Twitter, sharing sharp insights there. Next, join us for tomorrow's Blueprint Leadership Summit session at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. It's our final session of the week. We have 3 guests as part of our Blueprint Power Panel tomorrow, featuring distinguished alumni of our Blueprint Bootcamp. We have Kevin Carter, who's the founder and president of Inclusion Innovates, Chris Cox, senior advisor at the Partnership for Public Service and former senior intelligence officer, and Melissa Tassi, who's the director of learning and development at NetJets. This will be a fun session, so please be sure to join us. Next, our signature leadership development program, the Blueprint Bootcamp by Conant Leadership, is a 2-day leadership intensive offering elite level, highly interactive training with Doug and a community of your leadership peers, followed by a personal mentorship session with Doug. Due to COVID-19, we pivoted our in-person programming to an all virtual format at a discounted rate last year, and we are running 4 boot camps virtually at that same competitive rate this year. If you'd like to explore this premium tier of transformational leadership development, you can apply today at conantleadership.com/bootcamp or reach out to Conant Leadership Chief of Staff Mara Katsikis at mara@conantleadership.com. We are offering a special limited time coupon code only for Summit attendees and only for this week. You can use the code SUMMIT10 at checkout to get 10% off the registration price of our bootcamp. The code expires on Sunday at midnight, and we have very limited space remaining in our upcoming program, so act quickly if you want to reserve your spot. We can also announce that we are bringing back our popular limited run Blueprint coaching series for 2 sessions only this year in May and October. The coaching series is a virtual companion course to the Blueprint book. It's suitable for leaders at every level, from aspiring to seasoned. This learning series is taught personally by Doug. He guides participants through each of the 6 practical steps in the Blueprint. And the discount code SUMMIT10 is valid for this offering as well. Finally, you can always engage with our suite of free leadership resources at conantleadership.com or find us at Doug Conant on Twitter and LinkedIn. Watch our social media for timely leadership insights and updates about all of our virtual events and learning opportunities. So that's what we have on deck. If we weren't able to get to your question today, we do use the questions that you submit to inform our content and leadership development. But if you have any follow-up inquiries, you can reach out to us via email. Thank you again. We hope to see you tomorrow for our session with our Blueprint Power Panel. And thank you again to Indra Nooyi. Take care.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Indra.